I started my channel quite a few years ago, and I've only done deep dives on movies on the weekends on our live show. The more I did it, and the more it forced me to get out of my comfort zones and try new things. I'm a big sci-fi and fantasy guy, but I do love my drama films that are well written and have interesting stories and characters. A part of trying new things, I started last year with going deep dives into classic and non-classic horror films, which I don't particularly like. And then there's the kaiju genre. I am really not big into big monsters fighting each other, in the same way I don't like disaster movies. But my friend Tom Connors, who frequently joins our shows as a guest, urged me to go and try this one out. Godzilla Minus One was not showing in my country at the time of release, so I had to wait until it came out on a DVD in Japan to actually watch this movie. And now that it's finally out on Netflix, is Godzilla Minus One any good? I'm Meffistoe, like, share, and subscribe because this is my review of the movie Godzilla Minus One. As a ground rules for this particular review, I'm looking at this in layman's eyes. I'm not a fan of Godzilla, and I don't know every particular lore point. The only Godzilla movie I've actually seen through and through was the 1998 version with Matthew Broderick, which is hardly a good showing for the famous beast. However, the only distinction I will make is the fact that in a span of less than a year, the American audience got to see two Godzilla films, one produced by Legendary Films and one by Toho, the Japanese company, who actually came out with the original Godzilla movie. This movie we're reviewing today, Godzilla Minus One, came out late 2023, was produced by the Toho production company. The story of Godzilla begins with Odo Island, where a bunch of soldiers in a refueling outpost encounter Godzilla for the very first time. With the mechanics on the island is a kamikaze pilot who, technically speaking, didn't do his job. This pilot, Koichi, manages to survive this attack and makes it back to Japan. As he reaches the mainland, he faces what most of Japan is facing, the aftermath of the Second World War and the rebuilding of Japan. But Koichi is facing a different thing. He is facing the shame of being a kamikaze pilot who actually survives and the shame that is brought upon him. One day, he bumps into a girl carrying a baby and gives them shelter. The baby is just an orphan and the trio become a makeshift family. Koichi manages to take on a job as a sea mine sweeper to help support this makeshift household. And as time passes, this patchwork family manages to rebuild the home. The troubles start as the dreaded monster Godzilla resurfaces and apparently is marching down on the path to Tokyo, and the government is such in disarray they cannot help the local population. One of the key elements in a disaster movie is overcoming the monster, but in Godzilla Minus One, we got an extra element. It is a nation full of people that has just come out of a war that they've actually lost. It's an army full of men that knew that at some point their own government abandoned them and sent them to their own death. It's a pilot that came back from the war with conflicting thoughts. An experience like no other individual. An experience that left him scarred even more than the war itself. I've never encountered a disaster movie that made me think about what just happened quite like this movie. On its surface, it's a simple story about overcoming a monster that came out from the deep sea and cannot be stopped. But what Takashi Yamazaki, the director, did was infusing the real human tragedy of the aftermath of such a brutal war and using it to punctuate the struggle of the inner demon alongside with seemingly real-life demons that are making this movie such a unique experience. Without spoiling too much, Koichi is battling a unique situation. He is supposed to come home to his parents because he promised them to come back alive. However, he was supposed to serve his country by taking his plane for a kamikaze mission and not return. On Odo Island, he was supposed to use his plane to try and shoot down Godzilla, but he did not. Koichi has to live with his regrets and his inability to act when it matters. And this is the theme throughout the movie. movie. It is a unique hero's journey that comes to a crescendo at the very end. And all of this is mirrored all around him, with the people of Japan undergoing the same kind of struggle collectively. They all face the aftermath of staying alive after 2 atomic bombs and the desolation of most of the main cities. And now they have to face this unimaginable threat, and they have to do it alone. It is not shocking to me that the VFX team won an Oscar. They did what I've been saying for years now, that the VFX budgets and the movie budgets are generally overblown. This movie was made for reportedly $15 million, but I have heard that it's a little bit lower than that. And yes, this was filmed in Japan, which probably lowered the cost of the VFX team, but it still means that a lot of planning went into the storyboards and pre-planning the shots in order for the VFX team to produce such a high quality result. Toho is known for having men in rubber suits tearing down model buildings. In this movie, the CGI monster looked great, but other than the monster itself, it feels like everything was supposed to be there. I'm sure that some of the shots with the ships are definitely CG, but you hardly notice it because it's so well made. And in any case, you are enthralled with the story in front of you. And this is how you do CG correctly. It is a tool and not a cheap-ass way in fixing your post-production issues. Godzilla Minus One is a movie that I would be happy to revisit once again. Reading the subtitles didn't bother me at all. I had no issues watching this thing in its native Japanese tongue. I highly recommend that if you have a DVD copy of this thing or watch it come up on Netflix, please pick it up and watch it. It is highly entertaining, even when the monster is not actually there. The human story of Koichi and the rest of the people of Japan is engaging and interesting. If you're like me and you're not a Godzilla fan or a kaiju fan, do yourself a favor and give it a chance. It might surprise me as I was surprised. This movie is absolutely fantastic. I thank you for watching, and remember, hope is a good thing, maybe even the best of things, and no good thing ever dies. I'll see you on the next video.